The idea that God placed himself within you is often misunderstood when it is heard too quickly or treated too literally. It is not an announcement meant to elevate the self above others, nor is it an invitation to claim divine authority. It is a quiet truth about proximity, about how guidance is not always delivered from distant heights, but often arrives from the most intimate place a human can experience: awareness. To say that God placed himself within you is to acknowledge that the signs, direction, and moral clarity you seek are not always external. They are woven into the way you perceive, choose, hesitate, and reflect. This does not make the human divine, but it makes the human responsible. Many people spend their lives looking outward for instruction, waiting for unmistakable signals or dramatic changes that will confirm what they should do next. Yet life rarely works that way. More often, direction unfolds as a subtle knowing, a gentle resistance, a sense of alignment or unease that cannot be explained logically, but also cannot be ignored. This is not imagination or emotion acting alone. It is the quiet relationship between the Creator and the created, expressed through conscience, reason, patience, and restraint. When God places guidance within a person, it does not shout. It waits to be noticed. There are moments when life slows down without asking for permission. Plans pause. Progress feels suspended. External movement becomes limited, and the mind grows restless because it wants answers immediately. These moments are often misunderstood as punishment or delay, but they are frequently invitations to listen more closely. Awareness becomes essential here, because without it, silence feels empty. With awareness, silence becomes informative. Inner clarity does not arrive through force, it arrives through attention. When the noise reduces, the inner signals become easier to recognize. This is why certain moments in life require more awareness than action. When circumstances become unclear, it is tempting to rush forward just to escape discomfort. Yet wisdom understands that movement without clarity often leads to correction later. Awareness allows a person to sense whether they are acting from fear, habit, or genuine understanding. When God's guidance is experienced within, it often appears as restraint rather than impulse. It encourages pausing, reconsidering, and observing the full picture instead of reacting to the most visible part of it. Preparation is often misunderstood as anxiety about the future. In reality, preparation is an expression of respect for time, responsibility, and consequence. It is not rooted in fear, but in understanding. A person who prepares is not assuming the worst. They are acknowledging that life has weight and that choices matter. When preparation is guided by inner clarity, it becomes calm and deliberate rather than frantic. It is the difference between building slowly with intention and scrambling to repair later under pressure. When people speak of trusting God, they often imagine surrendering effort. But trust does not remove responsibility, it refines it. Trust means acting with care, reflection, and patience, knowing that outcomes are not fully in human control, but that intention and conduct still matter deeply. The presence of guidance within does not replace thought, it sharpens it. It helps distinguish between urgency that is real and urgency that is manufactured by fear or comparison. Calm reflection strengthens spiritual discipline because it creates space between impulse and response. In that space, awareness grows. Without calm, the inner voice becomes difficult to hear, not because it disappears, but because it is drowned out. Emotional balance is not the absence of feeling, it is the ability to experience feeling without being ruled by it. This balance is cultivated slowly through repeated moments of choosing reflection over reaction, patience over haste, and understanding over assumption. There is a quiet confidence that develops when a person learns to recognize guidance within themselves. It does not make them rigid or arrogant. Instead, it makes them grounded. They no longer need constant validation because their actions are informed by something deeper than approval. They are less shaken by uncertainty because they trust their ability to listen and adjust. This confidence does not eliminate doubt entirely, but it prevents doubt from becoming paralyzing. It is important to understand that inner guidance is not infallible intuition detached from reality. It works in partnership with learning, experience, and humility. Awareness grows sharper when a person remains open to correction and reflection. When mistakes happen, they are not evidence that guidance was absent. They are part of the process of refining understanding. Growth often occurs through recognizing where awareness was ignored or overridden. Many people confuse loud emotions with truth. Strong feelings can be persuasive, but they are not always accurate. Inner clarity tends to be quieter. It does not rush. It does not demand immediate action. It invites consideration. When God places guidance within a person, it often appears as a sense of right timing rather than immediate certainty. It becomes clearer as one waits, observes, and remains present rather than forcing resolution. Stillness is not passivity, it is active attention. In stillness, a person notices patterns, recognizes recurring lessons, and becomes aware of subtle changes within themselves. This awareness builds emotional resilience. Instead of being surprised by every challenge, a person begins to see difficulty as part of a larger process. Calm reflection does not remove hardship, but it prevents hardship from distorting. Perspective. There are times when clarity arrives only after acceptance. Acceptance does not mean approval of everything that happens. It means acknowledging reality as it is before trying to change it. When resistance fades, awareness sharpens. This is often when inner guidance becomes most apparent. The mind is no longer busy arguing with circumstances, so it becomes receptive to understanding what those circumstances are teaching. Spiritual discipline grows quietly. It is not announced. It is developed through consistent attention to thoughts, reactions, and intentions. A disciplined inner life does not require constant intensity. It requires honesty. Being honest with oneself about fear, desire, and motive creates alignment between inner awareness and outward action. This alignment reduces internal conflict and creates a sense of steadiness even when external conditions are unstable. When people say they feel disconnected, it is rarely because guidance is absent. More often it is because attention is scattered. Modern life encourages constant stimulation, comparison, and urgency. These conditions make it difficult to remain present. Reconnecting does not require dramatic change. It requires choosing moments of quiet reflection and intentional awareness. In these moments, the sense of guidance within becomes more recognizable. Preparation, when informed by awareness, includes emotional readiness. It involves acknowledging limits, recognizing patterns, and understanding personal tendencies. This kind of preparation reduces self-sabotage. It allows a person to anticipate their own reactions and respond with greater care. Emotional balance is strengthened not by suppressing emotion, but by understanding it. The idea that God placed Himself within you can also be understood as accountability. When guidance is internal, responsibility cannot be fully outsourced. A person must engage with their conscience, reflect on their choices, and accept the consequences of their actions. This does not mean carrying everything alone. It means participating consciously in one's own growth. This participation is an act of respect for the life that has been given. Moments of uncertainty are often invitations to deepen awareness. They slow external progress so internal clarity can catch up. Without these pauses, a person may continue moving without understanding where they're going or why. Inner clarity provides direction that is not dependent on constant reassurance. It allows for flexibility without confusion and commitment without rigidity. There is a subtle difference between listening inwardly and becoming self-absorbed. True inner awareness does not isolate a person from others. It increases empathy. When one understands their own inner landscape, they become more patient with the struggles of others. Emotional balance makes room for compassion because it reduces defensiveness. Calm reflection softens judgment and encourages understanding. This sense is not about certainty. It is about trust in the process of awareness and growth. It accepts that clarity develops over time and that not all answers arrive at once. This trust reduces anxiety about the future because it emphasizes presence rather than prediction. Preparation becomes an act of wisdom, not because it guarantees outcomes, but because it honors responsibility. As awareness deepens, a person begins to notice how often they already know what needs to be done, even when they hesitate to admit it. Inner guidance does not always align with comfort or convenience. It often asks for patience, restraint, or courage. Recognizing this guidance requires honesty and humility. Acting on it requires discipline and calm. Reflection also reveals how quickly fear can disguise itself as urgency. Fear demands immediate resolution, while clarity allows time. When a person learns to differentiate between the two, decision-making becomes more grounded. Emotional balance is preserved because choices are made from understanding rather than pressure. There is a quiet strength in being able to sit with unanswered questions without becoming restless. This strength is developed through reflection and trust. It acknowledges that not knowing is part of growth. Awareness does not eliminate mystery. It helps one coexist with it without panic. Over time, consistent reflection creates a stable inner reference point. This reference point does not replace external advice or learning, but it helps evaluate them. A person becomes less reactive to every new opinion because they have developed discernment. This discernment is not rigid belief, it is informed awareness. The presence of guidance within also implies that growth is ongoing. Awareness is not a destination but a practice. Each experience adds nuance to understanding. Emotional balance improves as reactions become more measured. Spiritual discipline strengthens as reflection becomes habitual rather than occasional. In quieter moments, a person may notice that clarity often arrives after release rather than control. Letting go of the need to force outcomes creates space for understanding. This release is not resignation, it is trust that effort and patience can coexist. Preparation continues, but it is guided by calm rather than anxiety. Life rarely announces its lessons in advance. Awareness allows those lessons to be recognized as they unfold. Inner clarity does not prevent difficulty, but it prevents confusion from compounding difficulty. It provides a steady presence that remains even when circumstances change. The phrase, "God placed Himself within you," can be understood as an invitation to responsibility, awareness, and reflection rather than authority or certainty. It suggests that guidance is close, accessible through patience and attention. It asks for listening rather than declaring, for reflection rather than reaction. As this understanding deepens, the relationship between inner life and outer action becomes more coherent. Choices align more closely with values. Emotional responses become less extreme. Preparation feels purposeful instead of fearful. Calm reflection becomes a source of strength rather than withdrawal. And in this ongoing process, awareness continues to refine itself, revealing new layers of understanding, new opportunities for patience, and new reasons to remain attentive to the quiet signals that guide without insisting, that correct without condemning, that remain present even when the path forward has not yet fully revealed itself. and that continue to invite deeper attention to the subtle movement of understanding within the ordinary moments where meaning is often already present, waiting to be recognized, shaped, and carried forward through the next unfolding experience, where awareness again becomes the place where guidance quietly meets responsibility. When attention turns inward with sincerity rather than self-focus, something subtle begins to change in how life is interpreted. Experiences that once felt random start to reveal patterns, not as rigid rules, but as gentle indications of cause and effect. A person begins to notice how certain thoughts consistently lead to tension while others create ease. This observation is not about judging oneself, but about learning. In this learning, the idea of guidance within becomes practical rather than abstract. It shows up in how one chooses words, how one responds to pressure, and how one honors limits without resentment. There is also a shift in how time is perceived. Instead of viewing waiting as wasted space, reflection reveals waiting as active formation. Many inner qualities cannot be rushed into existence. Patience, discernment, and emotional steadiness require time to settle. When God allows guidance to be felt from within, it often unfolds gradually, shaped by repetition and lived experience rather than sudden realization. This gradual unfolding builds trust, not because everything becomes predictable, but because understanding becomes more resilient. One of the quieter insights that emerges through reflection is how often clarity is blocked not by complexity, but by distraction. The mind can become crowded with expectations, comparisons, and imagined futures. In that crowded space, subtle guidance struggles to surface. Simplifying attention by focusing on what is immediate and real creates room for awareness. This simplicity does not reduce ambition or depth. It sharpens them. It allows a person to engage fully with what is present, rather than being divided between what is and what might be. Another aspect of inner guidance reveals itself through discomfort. Unease is often misunderstood as something to escape, yet it can function as information. Not all discomfort signals danger. Sometimes it signals growth. Awareness helps differentiate between harmful stress and necessary stretching. When guided reflection is practiced, discomfort becomes less intimidating because it is interpreted thoughtfully rather than reacted to automatically. Emotional balance grows as discomfort is acknowledged without being dramatized. There is also wisdom in recognizing the limits of control. Inner clarity does not promise mastery over circumstances, but it does offer steadiness within them. This steadiness allows a person to act thoughtfully even when outcomes remain uncertain. It shifts focus from controlling results to refining intention. Preparation then becomes an exercise in readiness rather than prediction. One prepares character, not just plans. The presence of guidance within also reshapes how responsibility is carried. Responsibility no longer feels like a burden imposed from outside, but like a natural extension of awareness. Choices are made with greater care because their impact is felt more deeply. This depth does not create heaviness, it creates meaning. Actions feel connected to values rather than driven by impulse. Reflection further reveals how often people underestimate their capacity for quiet endurance. Strength is commonly associated with visible effort, yet much of it is internal. Endurance grows in moments when one chooses steadiness over reaction, clarity over assumption. These moments may appear insignificant, but over time they shape a resilient inner structure. Emotional balance becomes less dependent on external stability because it has been cultivated internally. There is also a change in how success and deep progress are measured. Instead of constant comparison, progress becomes personal and contextual. Inner guidance encourages alignment rather than competition. It values integrity of process as much as outcome. This does not diminish aspiration, it grounds it. A person still moves forward, but with awareness of pace and purpose. As reflection deepens, it becomes clear that many conflicts arise not from disagreement with others, but from misalignment within oneself. Inner clarity reduces this friction by bringing intentions and actions into closer agreement. When this alignment improves, interactions with others become calmer. Communication becomes more measured, listening more genuine. Emotional balance extends beyond the individual and influences relationships. There is a subtle humility that accompanies genuine awareness. Recognizing guidance within does not inflate the self, it tempers it. One becomes more aware of limitations and more respectful of complexity. Certainty softens into curiosity. This humility creates openness to learning, which further refines understanding. Moments of solitude take on new meaning as well. They are no longer experienced as absence, but as presence. In solitude, awareness has space to organize itself. Thoughts slow down, feelings become clearer. Guidance that felt distant during constant interaction becomes accessible again. Solitude is not withdrawal from life, but preparation for engaging with it more thoughtfully. The relationship between an effort and rest also changes. Rest is no longer seen as interruption, but as integration. Reflection during rest allows experiences to be processed rather than accumulated. This processing prevents emotional overload and supports balance. Preparation includes knowing when to pause, not as avoidance, but as maintenance. Inner guidance also informs how one relates to uncertainty. Instead of demanding immediate answers, awareness allows questions to remain open. This openness reduces anxiety because it removes the pressure to resolve everything at once. Trust develops not in specific outcomes, but in the capacity to respond wisely as situations evolve. Over time, reflection reveals that many fears are anticipatory rather than grounded. They are projections rather than realities. Awareness helps identify these patterns and gently correct them. Emotional balance strengthens as imagined scenarios lose their authority over present experience. There is also a growing sensitivity to intention. Actions are examined not just for their results, but for their origin. Was this choice driven by understanding or by avoidance, by clarity or by habit? This examination is not harsh, it is honest. It supports spiritual discipline by aligning behavior with deeper values. As this practice continues, life feels less fragmented. Experiences connect. Lessons accumulate. Guidance within becomes a steady reference point rather than an occasional insight. This steadiness does not eliminate challenges, but it reduces disorientation. One may not always know what will happen next, but there is confidence in how to meet it. Awareness also reveals how much influence small, consistent choices have over time. Emotional balance is rarely the result of a single realization. It is built through repetition. Choosing calm reflection repeatedly shapes temperament. Preparation becomes habitual rather than reactive. In this way, the idea that God placed Himself within you unfolds as an ongoing relationship rather than a fixed state. It is expressed through attention, responsibility, patience, and humility. It is experienced not through declaration, but through practice. Guidance remains present, not as a voice demanding obedience, but as an orientation toward clarity that continues to develop as awareness deepens, as understanding matures, and as reflection remains active within the ordinary rhythms of life, where meaning continues to form quietly, layer by layer, through moments that invite attentiveness without insisting on resolution. allowing insight to emerge gradually as the inner life continues to expand in depth and coherence without reaching a final point of completion. As this understanding settles, something important becomes clear. Guidance within is not meant to replace effort, learning, or responsibility, but to steady them. It acts like an inner compass rather than a fixed map. A compass does not tell you every detail of the terrain ahead, yet it continually reminds you of direction. In the same way, inner awareness keeps pointing the heart toward what is grounded, honest, and necessary, even when circumstances change or certainty feels distant. With time, a person begins to recognize that clarity often arrives after sincerity. When intentions are examined honestly, confusion tends to lose its grip. This honesty is not harsh self-criticism, but a willingness to see oneself accurately. From that accuracy comes freedom. The freedom to adjust, to refine, and to move forward without carrying unnecessary weight. Inner guidance thrives in this atmosphere because it is welcomed rather than resisted. There is also a quiet reassurance in knowing that not every step needs to be perfect. Awareness teaches that growth is not linear, and understanding deepens through lived experience. Mistakes do not erase guidance. They reveal where attention was divided or rushed. When reflected upon calmly, even missteps contribute to wisdom. Emotional balance strengthens when failure is treated as information rather than identity. Gradually, trust replaces urgency. Trust does not eliminate action, but it changes its quality. Actions become deliberate rather than reactive. Decisions are made with an awareness of consequence rather than impulse. Preparation feels steady, rooted in realism instead of fear. This steadiness allows a person to remain present even when outcomes are uncertain, because confidence no longer depends entirely on control. Inner clarity also rests. Shapes how silence is experienced. Silence becomes a space of alignment rather than emptiness. In it, thoughts reorganize, emotions soften, and perspective widens. The constant need to fill space with explanation or noise diminishes. Silence becomes supportive, a place where understanding settles instead of being chased. As awareness continues to develop, life feels less fragmented. Work, rest, relationships, and solitude begin to inform one another. Inner discipline no longer feels separate from daily living. It becomes embedded in how one listens, responds, and chooses. Spiritual reflection is no longer reserved for specific moments, but woven into ordinary ones. A person grounded in this awareness becomes less reactive to external pressure. Praise does not inflate, and criticism does not collapse the inner structure. This stability does not create distance from others. It creates presence. One becomes more available, more patient, and more attentive because inner balance reduces the need for constant defense. Over time, there is a noticeable shift in how challenges are approached. Instead of immediately asking why something is happening, reflection turns toward how to meet it wisely. This shift preserves energy and focus. It allows learning to emerge without resentment. Guidance within does not promise ease, but it offers coherence, a sense that experiences, even difficult ones, belong to a larger process of understanding. This coherence brings a quiet dignity to the way life is carried. Responsibility feels meaningful rather than heavy. Choices feel intentional rather than automatic. Preparation becomes a form of respect for the future without anxiety about it. Emotional steadiness becomes less dependent on circumstances and more rooted in perspective. At its core, the idea that God placed guidance within you affirms proximity rather than distance. It reminds you that wisdom is not always announced through extraordinary signs, but revealed through attention to what is already present. It calls for listening more carefully, acting more thoughtfully, and reflecting more honestly. This understanding does not separate spiritual life from practical life. It unites them. Awareness informs action, and action refines awareness. Calm reflection becomes a source of strength that does not seek recognition. Preparation becomes a quiet commitment to responsibility. Emotional balance becomes a steady presence rather than a temporary state. In this way, faith expresses itself not through intensity, but through consistency. Not through certainty, but through sincerity. Not through declaration, but through lived attention. Guidance within remains available, steady and patient, asking only to be noticed, trusted, and carried forward into the choices that shape each day, where clarity grows through awareness, balance is sustained through reflection, and understanding continues to deepen as life unfolds with meaning that is recognized not all at once, but gradually, through the calm recognition that the path forward becomes clearer. When one learns to listen carefully to what has quietly been placed close enough to be felt, understood, and honored through a life lived with thoughtful presence and steady intention.